Have you ever noticed that as we get older and arguably wiser, we sometimes start to, well, shrink? Not physically, but in our presence. Today, we're going to get into why that happens, and more importantly, we're going to lay out a clear, structured plan for how to reverse it. Just think about that for a second. It's a really powerful idea, and for a lot of us, it probably sounds very familiar, right? You've spent decades gathering experiences, gaining perspective, and developing real wisdom, only to find yourself kind of holding back. Maybe you're quieter in those meetings where you used to lead the charge, or you hesitate to jump in with a story at the dinner table. It's not some failure on your part. It's a super common phenomenon. And recognizing it, just seeing it for what it is the very first step. You know, there's actually a name for this, psychological shrinking, and the key words here are unconscious defense mechanism. This is so important. Your brain isn't trying to sabotage you. It's actually trying to protect you. It's trying to avoid all that exhausting mental energy it takes to constantly fight against feeling dismissed or dealing with the status change that can come with retirement. So what does it do? It comes up with a strategy. Just make the target smaller, be less visible, avoid the friction. But here's the thing, that defense, while it means well, it comes at a huge cost. It costs you your influence, your engagement, and it keeps your hard-won wisdom from being shared. So, here's our game plan for this explainer. First, we'll look at that weird paradox of gaining wisdom while losing presence. Then we'll really dig into why we make ourselves smaller. After that, we'll get to the good stuff, a powerful solution called the Presence Amplification Protocol, and 4 simple steps to put it into action. And we'll wrap up by talking about why staying seen is so important. And I'll give you one easy first step you can take today. All right, let's get to the heart of it. Why does this shrinking actually happen? You know, it's not like you just wake up one day and lose your confidence. No, it's a much more subtle psychological thing that starts as an unconscious and very human defense. Okay, one of the biggest reasons is this shift from what we can call automatic status to earned presence. Think about it. For most of our lives, our status is kind of automatic. It comes with a job title, right? Director, doctor, manager, even parent. People listen because your role implies a certain authority. It's just assumed. It's pretty effortless. But then, when that role changes, especially after retiring, that automatic status can just disappear. And what has to replace it is earned presence, a sense of relevance that you have to consciously build through your actions and your words. And that takes effort. It's right in that gap, that transition, where this psychological shrinking really begins to creep in. And if we dig a little deeper, we find a couple of other root causes. First, there's this thing called stereotype threat absorption. Basically, we're all swimming in these messages about aging, that older folks are slow or out of touch, and over time, we can start to unconsciously absorb those ideas and, unfortunately, act in ways that kind of confirm them. The second cause is just simple energy conservation. I mean, it takes a lot of mental energy to constantly assert your value. So the brain, trying to be efficient, sometimes decides, you know what, it's just easier to not fight it. And what's the result? We start using more passive language, we let other people make decisions, and we slowly, quietly fade into the background. Now, here's the good news. Because this is a predictable pattern, the solution can be just as structured. This isn't about some vague advice like, oh, just be more confident. No way. This is about a clear, repeatable system. Let's call it the Presence Amplification Protocol, or PAP for short. It's basically a toolkit for rebuilding your presence from the outside in. So this protocol is built on 3 core ideas, or mandates. You can think of them as tackling the 3 main ways we shrink, in our physical space, in our words, and in our sense of purpose. Together, they work to directly push back against those shrinking forces. Let's take a look at each one. First up is the posture mandate. Honestly, this is the simplest and often the most powerful place to begin. Think about it. Shrinking has a physical look, right? Slumped shoulders, looking down, arms crossed. The antidote is to just consciously do the opposite. Stand tall, pull your shoulders back and down, open up your chest, and physically take up a little more space. What's amazing is this doesn't just send a signal of confidence to other people. The science shows it actually sends a powerful signal back to your own brain. Second, we have the active language rule. Our words create our reality. When we start our sentences with phrases like, this is probably a silly idea, but, well, I'm no expert, but we're basically telling everyone, including ourselves, to not take what we're about to say seriously. So the rule is to just start noticing and then cutting out these phrases. State your ideas directly. Instead of, I was just thinking maybe we could, try, here's my suggestion, or I believe we should. It's a small tweak in your language that makes a huge difference in how you're perceived.
And third, there's the generative engagement. Now, generativity is just a fancy word for contributing to the world, for guiding the next generation. This gets us back to that idea of earned presence. When you actively take on a role where you're teaching a skill, mentoring someone younger, or volunteering your expertise, you naturally put yourself in a position where your presence is needed and your value is obvious. It gives you that earned status that directly fights back against any feeling of being obsolete.
Okay, so the protocol tells us what to do. Now let's talk about the how. How do we actually start doing this stuff in a way that feels natural and effective and not like we're trying to be someone we're not?
The key here is that this is not about some big, dramatic personality change overnight. Not at all. It's about starting with small, really manageable actions that build on each other over time.
So here's a 4-step action plan. Just think of these as little low-stakes exercises you can start trying out right away. These are the small hinges that start to swing those big doors of presence wide open again. Step 1 is the pre-entry posture check. It's simple. Before you walk into any social setting, a coffee shop, a family get-together, a meeting, just pause for a second right outside the door. Take a deep breath, stand up straight, roll your shoulders back, lift your chin, and then walk in with that open, expansive posture. It's a 2-second ritual that completely resets how you feel as you enter a room. Step 2, the qualifying language audit. Just for one day, try to pay attention to how you start your sentences when you give an opinion. Just be a curious observer of your own language. Notice how often you might use those little undermining phrases. You don't even have to stop yourself at first, just notice. Awareness is always the first step to making a change. Step 3 is what we can call the standing/sitting rule. The next time you're in a group, notice your instinct. Is it to grab a seat in the corner or on the edge of the room? Try to resist that pull. Instead, intentionally choose a spot that's a little more central, a little more visible. It's a really simple, non-verbal way of telling yourself and everyone else, I'm here and I'm part of this. And finally, step 4 is the competence question mandate. In your next conversation or meeting, just give yourself a little mission to ask 2 thoughtful questions. This is so powerful because it shifts you from just being a passive listener to an actively engaged participant. Asking good questions shows that you're listening deeply and thinking critically, which are 2 of the biggest signs of wisdom there are. So we've covered the why, the what, and the how. But before we wrap up, I really want to focus for a minute on the deeper value here. Why does doing this work really, truly matter in the long run? Here's the most important thing to get. Amplifying your presence is not an act of ego. It is essential psychological maintenance. Seriously, just like you'd stretch to stay physically flexible, these practices help you stay socially and psychologically present. They build something called self-efficacy, which is just a real belief in your own ability to have an impact. This directly fights back against that awful feeling of becoming obsolete. And most importantly, it makes sure that all your incredible wisdom remains a visible, vital, and influential force in the world where it belongs. Wow, we have covered a lot of ground, haven't we? From the deep psychology of shrinking all the way to a practical 4-step plan. So let's bring it all home and boil it down to one single takeaway and one very gentle, very simple challenge to get you started. If you remember just one thing from all this, let it be this. Shrinking is not a personal weakness. It's a protective defense your brain uses against losing status. And the Presence Amplification Protocol is simply the toolkit you can use to intentionally and systematically show the competence and value you already have. And now, for your challenge. Please don't try to do everything at once. Just pick one thing. Think of one social setting you go to all the time. Maybe it's your weekly book club, a community meeting, or even just the grocery store. The very next time you go, just commit to doing that pre-entry posture check before you walk in. Pause. Align your spine, open your shoulders, and walk in. That's it. That's your first step. You know, in the end, what this is all about is alignment. It's about making your outer presence match your inner wisdom. So let's remember, that tendency to shrink is just an unconscious defense against feeling dismissed. And the most helpful thing to know is that you have a tool, the Presence Amplification Protocol, to consciously use your posture and your language to signal the competence you already possess. By intentionally amplifying your presence, you make sure your wisdom doesn't just stay locked inside. You make sure it remains visible, valuable, and a powerful source of your enduring relevance and influence. You've earned it. Now go and claim the space it deserves.